People always ask me, what's the smartest thing you've ever done as a father? I usually joke and say, not panicking when my daughter learned how to drive. But if I'm being honest, the smartest thing I ever did was this. I pretended I didn't speak English for 6 months to test my daughter's boyfriend. And what I learned during those 6 months saved my daughter from years of lies. Let me explain. My name is Daniel Alvarez. I'm 47 years old, a father of one daughter, Sophie. Sophie is my entire world. I was born in Brazil and moved to the United States when I was 10. By the time I hit high school, I sounded like any other American kid. No accent, no struggle, no mistakes. But my parents made sure I never forgot Portuguese. They believe language is power. Sometimes quiet power. Last year, Sophie came home glowing. She sat across from me at the dinner table and said, "Dad, I'm seeing someone." Now, any parent knows that moment. You smile, you nod, and internally, your brain goes into full surveillance mode. His name was Ethan. Ethan was impressive, at least on the surface. Tall, clean-cut, soft-spoken. The kind of guy who shook my hand with 2 hands and looked me directly in the eyes. He called me sir every other sentence, brought flowers every time he came over, helped my wife clear the dishes without being asked. Honestly, it was almost too perfect. Something about it felt practiced, like he'd studied how to be the ideal boyfriend. At first, I ignored the feeling. Parents are paranoid, I get that. But the feeling didn't go away. One evening during dinner, Sophie casually mentioned, "Ethan's taking Spanish in college." That's when the idea hit me. Not a normal idea, not a reasonable idea, a ridiculous one. The next time Ethan came over, I pretended I barely spoke English. I smiled, I nodded, I answered in broken phrases. And when I needed to say something complicated, I spoke Portuguese and let Sophie translate. I told Ethan, through Sophie, that I'd had a mild stroke years ago that affected my language center. Sophie nearly choked on her water. Later that night, I explained everything to her privately. She stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "You're insane," she said. But then she laughed. And after a long pause, she said, "Okay, I'll help." The first few weeks, Ethan was flawless, patient, respectful, smiling. He even downloaded a translation app so he could communicate better with me. I watched him carefully. I listened. Month 1 passed. Month 2, things changed. When Sophie left the room, his mask slipped. Not dramatically, just subtly. One night, while Sophie was in the bathroom, he leaned back in his chair and muttered, "This food is awful." Another time, "How long is this dinner going to take?" Once, I heard him mock my accent under his breath, just quiet enough to think no one noticed. I noticed. I always noticed. I smiled, I nodded, and I offered him more food. Then came Sophie's birthday. Ethan arrived with an expensive bracelet. Very expensive. Later that night, I stepped outside for fresh air and heard him on the phone. "Yeah, I returned the cheap one, got the silver one instead. Her dad's loaded, gotta keep up appearances." That was interesting, because I'm not loaded. We live in a modest 3-bedroom house. I drive a 2016 Subaru. Comfortable, yes. Rich, not even close. A few weeks later, Sophie had a long hospital shift. She's in nursing school. Ethan showed up anyway, said he forgot his charger. I let him in. While I pretended to watch a Portuguese soccer match, I watched him out of the corner of my eye. He took photos of our mail, our investment statements. He opened my desk drawer when he thought I wasn't looking. That night, I knew, but I needed proof. So the next week, I left fake bank statements on the kitchen counter. Negative balance, massive debt, financial disaster. 3 days later, Ethan told Sophie he needed space, said he wasn't ready for something serious, said he needed to find himself. Sophie was heartbroken, but she was also suspicious. She asked me, "Dad, did your test show something?" I told her everything. We waited. 2 weeks passed. Then Ethan texted her, said he'd worked through his issues, said he missed her, said he wanted to try again. Sophie invited him to dinner. Ethan arrived with flowers, called me sir, smiled like nothing had happened. I cooked his favorite meal, the same one he'd called disgusting. Halfway through dinner, Sophie looked at me and spoke in perfect English. "Dad, can you pass the salt?" I answered just as smoothly, "Of course." Ethan froze, fork suspended in mid-air. "You speak English?" he stammered. "I've spoken English for 35 years, I said calmly, almost as long as I've been spotting men who date my daughter for money. Color drained from his face. Sophie held up her phone. Unlocked. Texts to his friends. Plans. Calculations. He grabbed his phone and stormed out, called Sophie crazy, called me a sneaky old man. That night, Sophie cried. The next morning, she hugged me and said, 6 months of pain is better than a lifetime of lies. Today, Ethan is dating the daughter of a car dealership owner. Sophie, she's dating a guy from nursing school. He brings homemade cookies, talks to me the same way whether Sophie's around or not. And every time I hear him laugh in our kitchen, I'm reminded sometimes the smartest thing a parent can do is stay quiet and listen.